Hey, it's Mark Bergin from the Browns Nation Station. The listeners of the Browns Nation Station can show their Browns Nation pride by going to brownsnationswag.com. The site has all the latest and best fan gear to represent your team. Again, that's brownsnationswag.com. And if you're watching the Browns Nation Station on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss another episode. All right, cue the music. It's time to start the show. Welcome to the Browns Nation Station. I'm your host, Mark Bergin, joined tonight by fellow BrownsNation.com writer Wendi Oliveros. Wendi, we are recording this in the immediate aftermath after the 47-42 loss in a thriller against the Baltimore Ravens. Wendi, I think this game is going to be remembered as the poop and rally game with Lamar Jackson rallying the Ravens late in this one. This might have been the game of the year in the NFL. What a wild one. But where do you even want to start with this?
I'm so mad. That's where I want to start. I'm so mad. I'm so mad at the defense. Mark, come on. Oh, all they had to do was just hold them. They couldn't do it all night. They could not stop anybody running the ball.
I'm so happy you mentioned that, just because I feel like more often than not, the head coach and the quarterback always bears the brunt of the criticism. And Baker Mayfield, after his interception, leading the Browns to 3 touchdown drives, played out of his mind. And it looked like this came down to one of those games where the last team with the ball ends up winning. And it comes down to a 55-yard field goal by Justin Tucker, the Ravens kicker, who has a career percentage of 90.8%. He's the most accurate kicker in NFL history. And the Browns just could not find a way to contain Lamar Jackson. I know he's coming off an MVP season a year ago, but to me, it's pretty simple. We've seen how teams have slowed him down. You keep him in the pocket, you make him complete passes out on the perimeter, outside of the numbers, and the Browns were not able to do that from a defensive standpoint in this one, and that was extremely frustrating from Cleveland's standpoint.
I was hoping they were going to make an adjustment at the half, and he came right back out and did it again, and I thought, oh my goodness, no. I am. And I'm mad at Cody Parkey, Mark. What's going on?
That's a great point with Parkey as well. Leaving points on the board that could have been a difference late in this one. He missed a 39-yard field goal in this one and an extra point. The missed extra point was Parkey's second missed extra point of the season. And so you leave 4 points off the board, which could have been a difference maker late in this one.
Yes, it was. And then, do we want to get into the time management at the end of the game? Do we want to talk about how they scored potentially too fast?
Well, I think that's a fair question, Wendi. But the question I was going to ask you is, if you're Kevin Stefanski, knowing that you can't stop Lamar all night, would you have gone for 2 in the situation? And ultimately, it wouldn't have made a difference. Instead of just tying it up, Tucker's field goal at the end would have then surpassed what would have potentially been a 1-point lead if you go for the 2-point conversion and then convert that 2-point conversion. But that was the question I was going to have is, okay, scoring too quickly, that's one thing. And here's the thing is, after a certain point, how much can you continue to rely on your offense? And at what point can you say, all right, our defense has got to buckle down and has to make a stop? And it seemed like throughout the duration of this game, third downs for the Browns were a problem for the defense, and they just couldn't get off the field.
No, they could not. They could not. I didn't think they were going to go for 2. That 2-point conversion that Donovan Peoples-Jones managed to be at the right place at the right time was pure luck. I didn't think they could, do it again.
Yeah, rather lucky than good. But and on that drive too, when Mayfield was down, it was 34-20. And this was late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, and the Browns are going for it on fourth down because they realize how the Ravens offense continues to chew up clock with Jackson in the ground game in keeping a moving clock. Stefanski decides to go for it on several fourth downs, and the Browns converted time and time again. So at some point, it's like, how much can you push your luck in deciding to go for it on fourth down or deciding to go for 2-point conversions? And I go back to, at some point, you've got to rely on the defense to make a play, whether it's Myles Garrett as a defensive player of the year candidate or someone else on this defense. I know Olivier Vernon had 2 sacks in this one. He had a batted down pass, but one thing I really noticed from the defensive standpoint from the Browns is their pocket contain of Jackson was absolutely abysmal. And there's an old slogan, Wendi, if you lose contain, you lose the game. And time again, they weren't even designed plays with Jackson. They were broken plays where he's making something out of nothing. He scrambles, gets outside of the pocket, and is able to find his receivers downfield. And after a certain point, you've got to keep your pass rushers in a designated lane, keep Jackson in the pocket. And again, I go back to, he struggles to make and complete passes outside of the numbers on the field. And what I mean by that is where the 10, 30, 40-yard, 50-yard lines are outside of the numbers, outside of the middle of the field, he struggles to complete passes. He likes finding Mark Andrews, the tight end, a Pro Bowler, up the seams. But Hollywood Brown struggled in this one for the Ravens. He had 3 drops, and then he has a key difference-making touchdown late to give the Ravens the lead. Mayfield goes back and leads the Browns all the way down the field. And then Jackson's able to move the ball enough to get it in field goal range for Justin Tucker, and Tucker making a 55-yarder on the road. It just goes to show you why he's the best kicker in the NFL and in NFL history. And think about how many times he's done this in his career, and he does it against the Browns tonight in a game that was huge because had the Browns won tonight, they would have cut the AFC North deficit down to 1 game because Pittsburgh lost last night to the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football. And so as exciting as this game was, the Browns had opportunities to win it, and they let it slip away.
They did. They did. That's what was, I don't know what's worse, week 1 where they were never in it, or this week when they were in it the whole time and I think should have won it. And when Trace McSorley came in, he shouldn't have even completed a pass either. Shut that down.
I think week 1 is certainly worse just to get completely routed, but you can see that the Ravens offense is completely different with Jackson off the field, but you can see the limitations that the Ravens have come playoff time, because if the Ravens do make the playoffs as, say, the 7th seed, if they sneak in, and we've seen this in the Ravens and Jackson's 2 previous playoff appearances. I know he's still in his 3rd season as a passer and as a quarterback in this league. But if he tries to do this one-man band routine come the postseason, we know it's not going to work, because against a more disciplined defense, he's not going to be able to escape the pocket as easily. Teams are going to specifically game plan for him. And other than his connection with Mark Andrews, I know they went back to Hollywood Brown, and Hollywood Brown for the Ravens had several drops. He had 3 drops before the Ravens went back to him to get the touchdown before the Browns tied it up, and then before the Ravens' final drive, which ended up winning it. But the only real connection he has in the passing game is with Mark Andrews. And it's like, I can see the writing on the wall, even if the Ravens somehow sneak into the playoffs, where it's going to be the same story yet again, because against better defenses, he's not going to be able to do the things that he did tonight. And you look at his final stat line, Lamar Jackson, 163 passing yards. And this is coming off a week where the week before against the Dallas Cowboys, he had something like, I think it was like 107 yards passing. And yeah, that's not taking into effect of everything he does with his legs and on the ground, but better teams come the postseason take that element of the game away. And we've seen this time and time and time again in NFL history. And I can tell you right now, the same thing will happen to the Ravens if they do sneak into the playoffs. And that's what makes this game so frustrating, because you certainly expect the Browns to get there. But the Browns offense is there, and we saw that tonight. Baker Mayfield really has it clicking. It was his first interception thrown in 5 games, and then the way he responded was so impressive. But the Browns defense and Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator, they're going to have to shore things up in the coming weeks, because if that's the defense that shows up on the last quarter of the regular season headed into the postseason, the Browns are going to be one and done, even if they make the playoffs, if the defense plays the way that it did tonight.
Absolutely. There's no way that he should trot out of the locker room cramped on 4th down and throw a touchdown pass. There is no reason on earth that that should happen.
100%. And I go back to the gap discipline of, what are you instructing your defensive ends to do? And if they have to play with a wider technique, if you want to get really technical, it's called a 9 technique, where a defensive end will line up outside shade of a tight end. So say the Ravens are at a shotgun formation, the defensive end would line up even outside the outside shoulder of Mark Andrews. And I think that's the way that you would then keep him in the pocket to get him from escaping from, you get outside the defensive end, outside the tackle. And that's where Jackson, time and time and time again, is able to be really, really effective in this league. But if you take that away from him and you force him to stay in the pocket and make throws out on the perimeter, take away the middle of the field. Again, a lot of this is easier said than done, but when teams have had success in slowing down Lamar Jackson, those are the things that they've done. And I really thought that the Browns would be able to do that in this one, considering they have Myles Garrett, considering that they have Olivier Vernon. If you would have told me that Lamar Jackson would have thrown for 163 yards in this one before the start of the game, I would have thought that the Browns would have a really good chance of winning. And again, that did not happen tonight, because he runs wild. 9 carries, 124 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
And he was slipping around. I don't know what the deal was with his cleats, but he did most of that when he was sliding around with whatever was going on with his cleats.
Yeah, and it looked like I think he changed out the cleats at some point during the game, and that was well before the cramping. And then all of a sudden, it's just like, Lamar Jackson, he's a video game quarterback, Wendi. If you're playing with him in Madden, it's a lot of fun. But again, I go back to, what has this league showed us historically of how quarterbacks are successful? And I think the new mold of quarterbacks is you can be mobile to extend plays and to make passes downfield, which is what Jackson did late in this one. But really, other than the last 2 drives, he didn't demonstrate that he could do that. He demonstrated on the drive that gave the Ravens the lead. Then Mayfield goes down and gets the subsequent touchdown. And then on the last field goal that set up Justin Tucker. And it's like, I was hoping against hope, but it's like you go up against a kicker who's been that accurate historically.
Yeah.
Even from 55 yards, it was just like, this guy's going to be money in the bank. And in my head, I'm like, how far away would the Browns defense have needed to keep him away from not drilling that field goal? I think it would have had to have been 60 plus.
I think so too. He had plenty of room, and he didn't look concerned. Everybody knew he was going to make it. The people in the stadium knew. It was a foregone conclusion.
So, Wendi, I want to know, as a Browns fan, what were your thoughts when the team was down 34-20 and it was like, here we go again. It's the same story that we've seen with the Browns time and time and time again. But then all of a sudden, this was coming off Baker Mayfield's interception, and then he leads a comeback and leads the Browns to a tie game. Kind of what was going through your mind at that point in the game?
Well, I've been a Baker fan, so I was glad he had this opportunity to show it. Yes, he made a horrible choice on the interception, but he regrouped and went on and just led them and did everything he could. I mean, he had to run in a touchdown. He had to have a rushing touchdown to get this game where it was. He couldn't do any more besides maybe go out and play defense. That's probably what he was thinking too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had in my show notes, Wendy, that when he runs the ball across the line of scrimmage, he's not nearly as fast as Lamar is, and
Oh,
he kind of
no.
struggles to run the ball. But I do think he does a good job at extending plays, and if he can keep his vision down the field and keep his head up to find his receivers, some of the throws that he made tonight, I think, show why the Browns made him the number 1 overall pick. And I'm not quite sure about that long-term contract extension yet, but I do think that the Browns should pick up the 5th-year option on his rookie deal at this standpoint. It'll probably be somewhere around $25, $26 million. And so that 5th-year option would be for the 2022 season. And we saw what he can do tonight when he finally has stability. He's finally getting more and more comfortable with this offense. Again, he's in his 3rd season. He's had 4 different head coaches, 2 of which, one was Hugh Jackson, the other one was Freddie Kitchens, and then the interim, Greg Williams, is a defensive coach. And so we know what he can do now. Stefanski's the one calling plays, so he's an offensive-minded coach. You pair what Mayfield can do as a passer with the 2-headed monster in the backfield with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. An analogy I like making, the Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield 2-headed monster duo in the backfield, 2 of the top 10 running backs in this league. And I really think he showed tonight why he's really started to take that next step. And the interception, which again was his first thrown in 5 games, it was the longest stretch of his career he went without throwing an interception. And it was like, oh man, here we go again. But the way he responded after that interception, I thought was very, very telling. And that's the guy that you want as a franchise quarterback in this league, is how do you respond to adversity? And I think he really showed that tonight.
And he had at least 2 on the money throws on 4th downs to try to extend the drives. I think he's shown it. I don't live in the Cleveland area, so I don't see all the local press, but I don't quite understand everything. I get it. He had a good rookie year. He hasn't had him since, but this year I think he's delivered. I think he's delivered, and he finally has a coach that's going to help him. So I mean, I don't know. I think he's it. I think he's it, definitely, like you said, for the 5th year and maybe further.
Absolutely. And that's what I think the next question is once you do pick up that 50 option, is he the guy long term? Because if he's not, what's your alternative? And that's something that Andrew Berry and the Cleveland Browns front office will need to evaluate in the coming weeks. But I certainly think he's shown that he's worth picking up that 5th-year option on his rookie deal, because the way he's played over the last few weeks has been very impressive. He hadn't thrown an interception since the Cincinnati game on the play where OBJ got hurt. So it was a long stretch, 5 games to where he had last thrown an interception. And that was a real concern coming into this season, is can he get back the accuracy of what he was known for coming out of Oklahoma? And can he play more ball control football? And I think there are some times now where he understands within a game when to throw the ball away, when to live to see another play, when it's like you don't need the home run ball, you don't need the touchdown on every single play. And that's part of quarterbacking in this league. And with Mayfield, I thought he kept the Browns in the game, in a game where the defense, it was like Swiss cheese, because as soon as they went on the field, if Jackson were playing the 2 drives Jackson wasn't out there, it was like, okay, the defense can get off the field. But as soon as Jackson steps back on the field, it's just like we're delaying the inevitable at this point, because the Browns, it was as if the Browns defense was in slow motion and Jackson was just at hyper speed the whole time.
I don't know what it was. They never looked good with him from the beginning of the game. I don't understand why they couldn't adjust. I understand he's the MVP, but other teams have done it. So it's not rocket science. Just do it.
And the Ravens are without their starting left tackle and Ronnie Stanley. Think about if the Browns were without Jedrick Wills or without Jack Conklin on the offensive line. That's what the equivalent of what the Ravens are dealing with on their offensive line, considering all of their injuries. And so people wonder, why isn't Jackson having quite as great a season as he was a year ago? remember, the team's right guard, future Hall of Famer Marshall Yanda, retired. Stanley goes down with an injury. The team had a massive COVID outbreak earlier this year. And so this is a team that has been absolutely decimated. And when all the teams are now game planning for you, considering you went 14-2 last year, you had the most rushing yards in NFL history during the 2019 season as a team, and Jackson coming off an MVP performance, teams are going to game plan for you. And so those tight formations that Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, designed a year ago aren't quite as exotic as they were during the 2019 season, because you weren't a target for every team in the league like you are this season. And so that's part of the reason why you see a bit of regression from the Ravens, but it was a must-win game for the Ravens. They improved to 8-5, but if you go down to 6 losses, had they lost tonight's game, you could pretty much kiss your playoff hopes goodbye. And so looking at the AFC North after this game, the Steelers now 11-2, still top the AFC North. Steelers have lost 2 straight, and had the Browns won tonight, they would have been within 1 game of the Steelers. And remember, the Browns and Steelers have to go head-to-head in Week 17. And so Steelers still several games ahead of the Browns now. The Browns now 9-4 after tonight's loss. But had they won, they would have been within 1 game headed into the last 3 weeks of the regular season. And how huge that would have been, because the Steelers are not trending in the right direction now. And look, they'll still probably win the AFC North, but had the Browns won the AFC North, hosting the home playoff game, I know there's not as many fans there, but that could have been a huge difference. And I'll tell you this too, Wendi, if there were any 2 games this season where I wish there were fans, last night in Buffalo on Sunday Night Football would have been awesome to see, and in tonight's game on Monday Night Football, Browns-Ravens at First Energy Stadium in Cleveland. The fans would have been going absolutely nuts in the dog pound. Wish we could have seen that, but that's something we're going to see with this team in the 2021 season, and how exciting that will be, because tonight's game, I really believe, was the game of the year in the NFL.
Yeah, let's just hope that the Browns win the next 2 New York games. Okay, they should. They should. Let's just hope they do. Because this game was, I know they still have the lead and it's all good, but this game would have really put the pressure on the Steelers. And it really would have kind of moved the Browns forward to be really in the discussion for winning the division that nobody in their right mind would have predicted at the beginning of the season. So it was there. It was there for the taking. That's why I'm still so mad.
When you look at it from a bigger picture standpoint, I completely agree, Wendi, as we start to wrap up here on the Browns Nation station. And the Browns' next matchup will be against the Giants in Week 15. The Browns will play on Sunday Night Football in that road contest. So back-to-back weeks in prime time. Hopefully the Browns can get right. They'll be a 3.5-point favorite over the Giants. Remember, the Giants are still in the hunt for the NFC East. And so we'll see what happens in that one. The Browns need to redeem themselves and can't really afford to lose then back-to-back games after tonight's loss to the Ravens, just because if they lose and the Ravens keep winning, I still think the Browns are in good shape for the playoffs at this point, but especially like you said, Wendi, against these 2 New York teams, games that you're expected to win, you've got to win. As nice as it would have been to beat the Ravens tonight, you look back at the previous week with the Browns with their win over the Tennessee Titans and how big that win was, because the Titans are going to be a playoff team this year. And so you've got to win the ones that you're expected to win, and that starts next Sunday night against the Giants.
It does. And really keep winning and force the big game at the end of the season with the Steelers. I mean, it could happen. We don't know which way the Steelers are going right now. Yes, they're now 2 games behind them, but still, I don't know.
As we start to wrap up here, Wendi, I did want to ask you this final question as we're signing off here. And I'm going to answer it first, and maybe I'm being a bit of a Browns homer. But with tonight's performance, big picture, long term, and what we've seen of what it takes for a quarterback to succeed in this league, Long term, I would rather have Baker Mayfield than Lamar Jackson right now. Where do you stand on that?
Yes, I would too. I would too, because you have it, the offense opens up more. There's just more that he can do. Um, yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking about the defense. I can't get my mind off the defense. I'm sorry. But yes, Baker is more of your NFL caliber quarterback that if he continues to play like this, should be more successful.
I'm glad you're with me on that. And people are going to be watching this on YouTube and say, you're nuts, you're being a Browns homer. But I want you to think about it from the standpoint of if you had a quarterback throw for 100 yards, 160 some yards tonight, if his name wasn't Lamar Jackson, would you evaluate it the same way? If it were any other quarterback in the league. And look, I understand his ability to run the ball. I'm probably taking that a little bit for granted, but come playoff time, when he needs to make throws down the field, when it's a vital down and distance, and you've got to be able to make a throw from the pocket on a 3rd and long, and you can't just run for it against a disciplined defense. We know what it takes to have postseason success. There's a reason why running quarterbacks have a limited shelf life in this league. And I think Mayfield's finally starting to put it together and finally starting to trend in the right direction. If you would have had this question earlier this year and you would have said Mayfield, a lot of people would have said you were nuts. But he's finally starting to have continuity with his receivers, get more comfortable with the system. Again, both quarterbacks are in their 3rd year, but I go back to this is Mayfield's 4th different NFL head coach. And the importance of coaching on a quarterback's development, something that Jackson has had with with John Harbaugh and with Greg Roman, because he's had that continuity and that stability in Baltimore in the sense that they've designed the entire offense around his skill set. When you can do that with what Baker Mayfield can do as a passer, we know long-term what that takes for quarterbacks to have success in this league. And that's what I will continue to go back to until Jackson proves otherwise in the playoffs. And he has not done that thus far in his young career. Still a lot of time, but certainly an exciting one tonight. And Wendi, the sentiment I get from you is the Browns need to start winning games like this instead of say, oh, it's a great moral win to even have been in this one, instead of getting blown out like they did in week 1. You'd like to see the Browns come out victorious on a night like tonight. But I do think it shows that come postseason time, assuming the Browns finally break that postseason drought, that this team is for real, that this team is legit, and they got to get right next weekend against the Giants.
They got to get the defense right. They've got to. Yes, I agree.
Go ahead, Wendi.
We didn't talk about the safety that really ticked me off at the end of the game either. That totally unnecessary safety at the end.
Did you pick the Browns to cover? The Browns were a 3-point underdog, and then so that ended up being losing by 5, so 47 to 42. So I know some gamblers might have been mad about that, but would you have wanted to see a different trick play? What made you mad about the safety?
Because they were running backwards. And there was I mean, come on. If you're going to put out a trick play, at least try to execute it right after the disaster of letting Tucker just, kick that little chip shot.
Yeah, and that goes back to the defense, and as well as Baker Mayfield and the offense played tonight, defense
and special teams.
Go back and watch some of the tape, though. The gap responsibility against Jackson, and I know it's a lot easier said than done, but the gap responsibility from the Browns defensive line was absolutely abysmal, and I cannot underscore that more than I can't get that point across enough. And there were missed tackles. I know the Ravens running game is their strength as well, but again, we have enough tape of Jackson now to know what it takes to slow him down at the very least. And the Browns, they made it way too easy for him tonight. They really did.
They did. And I'm still mad. And I'm mad at Cody Parkey too.
That is something where a lot of Bears fans can relate to, Wendi, with Cody Parkey. Sure. So I know you're not alone there. But Wendi, this is always so much fun. I don't want to keep you up too late. Again, recording this after the Browns' 47-42 loss on Monday Night Football to the Baltimore Ravens. But this is always so much fun. Any final thoughts before we sign off here, Wendi?
I don't have any. I've pretty much vented all I can.
We'll see what happens next weekend on Sunday Night Football. Again, the Browns traveling, taking on the New York Football Giants in Week 15 on Sunday Night Football. Back-to-back weeks in prime time. So see if the Browns can get right. They open as a 3.5-point favorite there. For Wendi Oliveros, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for listening to the Browns Nation station. Please go rate, review, and subscribe to the show and leave us a 5-star review. We'd love to read that here on the show. Again, please rate, review, and subscribe. I'll see you next week. Take care, and so long, everyone.